This child, who was 14 years old, was guilty of absolutely nothing. The store owner and his son murdered him. But this particular case just really crystallized for so many in the Black community, first of all, how unsafe Black people are in this country. I don't believe that the justice system is broken. I believe that the justice system is working exactly as it's been intended to work. And that is to disenfranchise Black people and to allow white people who are committing the same kinds of crimes to get away with it scot-free.
Stand your ground law in Texas. It allows people to protect themselves, but it didn't allow Karmelo Anthony to protect himself. For Black people, the laws are not meant to protect you, they're meant to criminalize you. And for white people, the laws is the opposite. For white people, the laws are meant to protect you and not to criminalize you. I call it the criminal injustice system. Yes, peace and blessings, everybody. I am your brother, Orina, all the way from the motherland, all the way from Kenya, Nairobi, nation's capital. Welcome to Sell Africa to Africans, the home of Pan-Afrikanism. Well, today we have a special guest on the show. You've seen her on various Instagrams and YouTube, really educating and informing our people, the global African race. And I'm happy to have her on the show. Shanell, welcome to South Africa to Africans. How are you doing?
Hey, Arena, I'm so good. I'm so happy to be on your show. I've also been watching you doing the same thing from Kenya, and I've just been such a big fan of yours for such a long time. So I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, and it's funny. The thing about us Pan Africans is we might not have met physically, but spiritually and mentally we are together. And whenever us Pan Africans meet, we just click immediately. That's how the power of Pan Africanism is. But before we start, because today's topic is very serious. It's about genocide. I mean, it's just flat out genocide of Africans in America. We're going to talk about the Cyrus Carmack case. We're going to talk about Karmelo Anthony and the criminal. I call it criminal injustice system because there's no way it's a criminal justice system for Black people. But let's start with Cyrus Carmack Belton, a Black boy killed by an Asian store owner because of a water bottle that he did not steal in the first place. For people who don't know that story, please give us a summary of this. Give us a summary of what happened and how the Asian man ended up getting away with murder.
Thanks for bringing this to the attention of your audience, Arena, because it's a case that just exemplifies a broader issue here in the United States of America when it comes to the assault on Black people's bodies. In May of 2023, a then 14-year-old Cyrus Carmack Belton went to a convenience store. It was a convenience store that's attached to a gas station, which they have many of here in the United States. And he had taken 4 water bottles. He put the water bottles back. He then was proceeding to leave the store. The store owner, along with the store owner's son, approached him, asked him about the water bottles. He had not stolen them. He'd stolen nothing. He must have felt in fear of his life. He began to try to get away from the store owner and the store owner's son. He began to run. He ran 100 yards from the store before the store owner and his son began to shoot at him. They basically executed him. They shot him several times in the back and they killed him. And that was in 2023. It finally went to trial this year. And the store owner and his son were both found not guilty. Again, this young man who was 14, he's a child. This child who was 14 years old was guilty of absolutely nothing. The store owner and his son murdered him. And this is not something that happens in a vacuum in this country. This is something that there's a long history of these kinds of things happening. But this particular case just really crystallized for so many in the Black community, first of all, how unsafe Black people are in this country. But it also exposed a deep wound because it was only after the Civil Rights Act passed in 1965 that really opened up the opportunity for Asian people, along with all other minorities, to be able to come into the United States of America, because before then there were quotas on how many people could come. And so the Asian community has had an outsized impact on the Black community. The Asian community was not welcomed in the white communities when they came here to the US. White people didn't want Asians to open stores in their communities because of the anti-Asian sentiment that existed. There were also anti-Asian housing clauses that existed. So many Asian people could not even buy homes here in the US. Whereas in the Black community, when the Asian community began to come in large numbers during those times, the Black community was still suffering. We've been suffering from the infusion of drugs that were being put in our communities after the Civil Rights Movement. You may have heard of COINTELPRO. Right. So our communities have been flooded with drugs. Also, the wealthier and middle class Black people had begun to leave the Black communities because they were able to now buy homes in the white communities. And many of us believe that in order to kind of seal success, or in order to feel successful, being able to have entree to these affluent communities showed that you had reached this pinnacle of success. So you had a lot of, and I know I'm going to go somewhere with this. So you had the middle class and the upper class Black community leaving the urban centers where forever that's the only place they could live. And at the same time, you had industries that had been in the urban communities also leaving. And so there was a vacuum in the Black community. You had job loss, you had an inundation of drugs, you had a strong middle and upper class group of Blacks that were leaving the Black community. And then you also had, poor housing and all these things. So into the vacuum of all of these policies that had been created by American lawmakers, the Asian community was able to come into the Black community because they were not welcome in other communities. They weren't welcome in the white community. Open up businesses and really secure a foothold here in the United States, which allowed them to then, pay for their children's education and all this and that. But it was built on the backs of Black people who were dealing with one of the most difficult times in their lives, or for those people in that generation. And Asian people were able to secure themselves because of the Black dollar. You would think that the Asian community would have a sense of understanding and a sense of thankfulness for the for what the Black community had meant to them. But many Black people have felt as if the Asian community has been adversarial, has not been kind. Again, this doesn't speak for all, but this is a feeling amongst many African Americans. The businesses that they operate aren't businesses where you'll see many Black people employed. They're not businesses that are necessarily nice to look at. They're more of an eyesore in the community. They monopolize certain businesses, especially the beauty supply business. When you have Black people trying to get into those businesses, they'll do everything in their power to make it difficult for them to have access to the manufacturers and these kinds of things. And so many Black people have felt as though the Asian community has come into the Black community, secured themselves, been more than happy to take Black dollars, give little to nothing back. And now in this case, we have another young Black man who has been brutally executed by an Asian father, son, and justice has not been served. So right now there's a boycott going on here in the United States, where many Black people are saying we don't want to patronize businesses run by Asian shopkeepers who have a history of anti-Black sentiment.
And that's the right way to do, Shanell. Boycott those businesses, because I'm aware that there are a lot of Asian stores, Asian restaurants, Chinese foods all over the Black neighborhood, and I feel like they need to be boycotted, because why should you support them economically, and especially after, sorry, go on, Shanell, go on.
No, I was just, going to agree with you on that. And I think the other thing is that Black businesses, Black people who have tried to open businesses in Asian neighborhoods have not been welcomed at all. The anti-Black sentiment in the Asian community has been palpable for a very long time, and it hasn't gone unnoticed by African Americans. So I think that many people, immigrants who come to this country don't, for whatever reason, take the time to search out and understand the shoulders on which they stand and the reason for why they're even allowed entry into this country. It's not because, white lawmakers one day decided we want this nation to be a rainbow nation and we want to welcome people from all over the globe to come here. It's because African Americans died for that right. We died for civil rights law legislation. And that is the reason why Asian Americans, along with so many others, were able to come here. It's because of the sacrifices of the African American community. And those sacrifices did not go, those sacrifices that we made benefited so many communities, but they deepened in many ways, they had a negative effect on us because we saw what the government did to the Black community, inundating our communities with these very addictive drugs, then creating laws to criminalize the drugs that they put into the community. So you have, a war on drugs after the government floods the community with drugs. And so now you have Black men who are being incarcerated at, double and triple the national average, which is really destabilizing the Black family. You have the wealthier class and the middle class Black people leaving for more affluent neighborhoods because for the first time in history, they can live in these white neighborhoods. Before, they weren't allowed to. And so that is deepening the financial insecurity in the Black community. And then add to that, you have the government redlining the Black community. Redlining was something that was done on a federal level, where basically they would use a red line and tell banks, these are the neighborhoods where you cannot lend money to these people so that they're not able to access capital to be able to open up businesses. So you have a situation where it's very difficult to open up a business because this area has been redlined. The red line communities are also communities where corporations are not going to build businesses in that community. Here in the United States, every community has a tax base, and your tax base is heavily dependent on the companies that decide to open up businesses in your community. So for instance, if you want your child to go to a good school here in the United States, you want to make sure that your child lives in a good neighborhood, because the schools are funded by the taxes that community brings in. So if you live in an impoverished area, you're not going to have lots of businesses, which means you're not going to have a strong tax base. And if you don't have a strong tax base, then the schools that your child go to are going to be underfunded compared to schools in more affluent communities. So it becomes a ripple effect in the Black community where the poverty becomes compounded. So you have Black children who are expected to perform on the same levels as their wealthy white counterparts when they aren't given the same opportunities, when they don't have the same opportunities as those people. In fact, they have more barriers to their being able to overcome poverty than their white counterparts. And so it's just important to understand the vacuum in which the Asian community was able to step into the Black community. First of all, they weren't welcome in white neighborhoods. They weren't allowed to rent in many areas. The Black community is the community that allowed them to come into their communities to secure, a foothold in the economic world here in the United States. And it was our dollars that secured that. And so when something like this happens, it just lays bare so many other issues that exist in the Black community, and the anti-Black sentiment that exists in Asia. And I always like to bring it back also to what's happening in the diaspora, because during COVID, we saw how African students and people were treated in China, how they were being evicted from their homes. We all saw those videos. We saw the anti-Asian sentiment that existed. We've seen it throughout the continent when it comes to, businesses throughout the continent, whether it's Nigeria or wherever, where you have this anti-Black sentiment that exists. In Ghana, we've seen the videos of how these Asian business owners are treating Ghanaian people. And of course, you're saying that it's happening there in Kenya. So it's not just specific to the African American community. It's indicative to how Black people throughout the diaspora, including on the continent, have been treated historically by Asian, the Asian community. Of course, we're not talking about all, but a large enough population for this to be an issue where there's a through line, not only here in the United States, but throughout where any place where you see a large Black population and a population of Asian business owners. It is definitely a problem.
It was extremely tragic. And when I saw the Asian man get released and everything, I said, and I've always been saying this, we are on our own. I don't know where you stand with these terms, Shanell. These terms such as minorities, people of color, marginalized communities. If there are terms that I'm against totally, is those terms: minority, people of color, marginalized groups. There's no such thing as that. We are on our own. Black people globally, we are on our own. Nobody respects Black life. Black life is something pedestrian. Wherever you are, you're talking about Asians in America. I remember there was a case where, and there are many cases like this, since Asians are the ones who are building the roads here, they're the ones who are doing a lot of construction in this country, and they own a lot of businesses, especially Chinese people. I can't tell you, Shanell, the cases that have gone on here, including Asian employers beating Kenyan employees because they've come to work late, like literally whooping their asses, like literally violence, and this goes on in many Chinese-owned businesses here in Kenya, where Kenyan employees are being physically abused by Chinese employers, and not only Chinese employers, East Indian employers as well. Verbal and physical abuse. I know this because I used to work for Indian employers back in the day when I was unemployed. Sorry, back in the day when I was still early in the employment circle, before I started my channel and before I became independent. So Asians in this continent have a lot of autonomy when it comes to how they treat Africans, and there's very little punishment that goes their way, because at the end of the day they're in bed with the government. So it is so messed up how it is when it comes to Asian relationship with Africans. So I again, Shanell, before you go, before you respond to this, I just want to say that this is we are here on our own. Nobody respects Black life. Nobody likes us Black people. We are on our own. Forget all these terms of people of color, minorities, marginalized groups. No, we are on our own. And until we understand that, we will never be free.
I agree with you on that. I think it's very important for us to understand that while that we may have a situation where, well, one or two people, we might be able to find, some people that agree with our struggle, unless they're interested in tearing down the mechanisms by which they're able to maintain their power, then we don't really have allies. And so it's very important for us to look amongst one another and to find ways to free ourselves. I'm so sorry to hear that this is such an issue in Kenya. I had absolutely no idea that that was something that's happened. I've seen some videos of Asian shopkeepers like physically assaulting African workers, but I didn't understand that it was something that was happening on such a large scale. It's terrible. I will say that Cyrus Carmack's family has gone on and are looking to file they want the federal government to file possibly federal hate crime charges against this family, against the Asian family responsible for killing him. But we don't know whether or not that's going to happen. And then they're looking at civil charges as well. Civil charges means that they would be able to sue the family for monies related to his death and the emotional toll that his death has taken on the family. So we'll see how that happens. Under this administration, though, I don't have a lot of faith that the federal government is going to file federal hate crime charges against the family, because unfortunately, this administration it has embraced federal hate or hate groups, white supremacist terror groups. So very little faith that that's going to happen.
Very sad indeed. You talked about one of the solutions being boycotting Asian businesses in the Black community. I totally support that. And also, I'm very disappointed at African leadership for not speaking up against genocide, whether it's police genocide or total genocide of Black people in America. I'm totally disappointed at leadership in Africa for their silence in this. And the best way that we can solve this as Africa, as a continent, I've always said this is Africa and other countries have been so used to America or Europe putting sanctions on them. So Africa and some parts of Middle East and other countries outside of the West, they have been so used to America and the whole West imposing sanctions on them. I think it's time for Africa to put sanctions on America. I think it's time for Africa to put sanctions on Europe and say that, okay, since you guys don't have no intention of stopping the police genocide or just outright genocide of Black people in America, no problem. No cocoa from us.
Yeah, I
No
think
cocoa.
that,
Yeah,
I agree. I think that the only way that that can happen is when the African continent begins to do business with each other. With
yeah,
a continent that is not united, we're just not as strong. The truth of the matter is that Africa could do business just on the continent and be able to be
that's
self-sufficient.
it. Yeah,
But as long as we are disconnected, we have situations where someone like Emmanuel Macron can go from the Sahel states and come to Kenya and be welcomed on stage. He can leave the ravages of the things that he did in Tunisia and throughout many West African countries. He can leave places like Haiti. The country can leave places like Haiti. I mean, the French can leave places like Haiti in total disrepair, in utter poverty that has been manufactured as a result of colonial legislation, and then go to other countries on the continent and find a welcome there. And that shouldn't happen. The struggles of the Burkinabes, of the Malians, of the Nigerians should be something of the greatest importance to the administration in Kenya right now, to Rwandans. I mean, there's no reason in the world why Rwandans should be fighting their own brothers and sisters in Congo, why the Ugandans should be fighting their own brothers and sisters in the Congo, when there is more than enough to go around for all of these neighboring countries. And honestly, these people are related. You know, these borders that have been created were created by colonial people, by colonizers. And so they don't really speak to a separation of people. They just speak to a divvying up of a country amongst thieves, of a nation, of a continent amongst thieves. And so I agree with you that we do need to stand strong, but the only way that we can do that is to do it together. As long as, we are approaching these imperial powers singularly, we are never going to be able to be strong enough to demand anything. It's only when we stand together that we'll be able to demand, and they understand that. And so they work night and day to try to maintain, our individuality and our fragmentation. We can't have that.
What needs to happen is that we need to unite our economy as a continent of Africa.
Yeah.
There's no way we can call ourselves free. There's no way we can do anything for as long as we unite our economy and we have a common currency and we have intra-trade in Africa. Once that happens, and then we nationalize all our natural resources, there's no way we can be in 2026 and we don't own most of our resources. Most of our resources, even here in Kenya, is owned by Western and Eastern powers as well, including China. So what needs to happen is that we need to own all of our resources. And I think the best way to solve police genocide is very, very simple. We say, America, no cocoa for you, no cocoa from West Africa, no tea and coffee from East Africa, no cobalt, no coltan, no lithium. Let's see where your iPhones will come from. Let's see where your chocolates will come from. Let's see where your Starbucks will come from. Let's see where your finished 100% markup. Let's see where they'll come from. And I think that's the best way to do that. We need to make sure that as Africa we have some contribution in this, and the best way to contribute to an end of police genocide and of this general genocide of Black people, be it police or civilian, is an sanction on US and Europe until they take this seriously, until they end because let me tell you, if the government wants to end police genocide, they can do it. If they want to, they can do it. I mean, Biden came in and he signed an executive order to end anti-Asian hate bill. Like he signed an anti-Asian hate law in his first day. Let me tell you, if the government wants to end something, they can do it within a stroke of the pen. But we have to push them to do so, and the best way to push them is by Africa having some sort of grabbing white supremacy by the balls through economic sanctions. Look at Iran; they're grabbing the world economy through the balls by closing the Strait of Hormuz, and now the US is like, okay, now we'll listen to you. Israel is like, oh, well, Israel is not listening to them, but US is willing to sit down with Iran because of what they've done with the Strait of Hormuz and by grabbing the balls of white supremacy through closing of the Strait of Hormuz. So that's what I'm trying to say. We need to be very smart in how we fight white supremacy, not by guns, not by bombs, but by the economy. What can we do to grab them by the balls through the economy? And we need to put sanctions on the West. That's the best thing. Africans are so used to America putting sanctions on us. So it's time for us to unite and put sanctions on America. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that we can only have that conversation when Africa looks inward. Right now, for one country to sanction the United States would be terrible for the country. But if the entire continent, even if a third of the countries, two-thirds of the countries on the continent chose to go that route, then it would have some power behind it. We see what the Sahel nations, three countries, have been able to do, and how what France is they're having a really hard time because these three countries have come together and they're standing strong together. And so the only way that Africa will ever be able to confront imperial powers, because it's not just the United States that's dependent on Africa's natural resources. It's also the whole Western world. Much of Europe is as well. And so you can't confront that kind of power, those kinds of systems standing alone. You have to do it in concert with other people who are on the same page as you. And so I do hope that that's something that happens. That's the only way forward. The truth of the matter is that we as African Americans will never be safe in this country as long as Africa is not strong. The reason why African Americans and Africans throughout the diaspora are so easily confronted and so easily met with this kind of violence is because these systems understand that we are not backed by a country that's going to be able to do anything to demand that this kind of violence stops. There's no way in the world we would see this kind of pointed violence at the Asian community, or the Chinese Asian community, I'll say, because Asia is a huge continent. Because Asian Chinese people has a strong government, and that kind of behavior would not be tolerated. And so this is what needs to happen. African Americans will never be safe in this country as long as Africa is not a strong continent. But we have to have leadership that cares more about its people than about itself, than about the very small group of people in its orbit who are trying to enrich themselves. And we see that that's been a problem. We can't allow petty grievances amongst our brothers to get us off track from what the larger goal is, which is that Africa is united and strong so that its diaspora can also be strong. It's very simple. The head of the house kind of directs the body. In Africa, for our Africans in the diaspora, is the head of the house. And as long as the head is absent, the rest of the body is going to be abused, because who's going to stick up for it? Nobody. And this is what's happened. So we've seen the same thing happen again, and I know that we said we were going to talk about this, but just last year, we had the case of Karmelo Anthony, 17-year-old boy from Fresco, Texas, who was at a track meet. It began to rain at this track meet. He was invited to come to come into a tent from a friend, is what the reports have said, to escape the rain. When he did that, he was approached by twin boys, two young men. They're twins. They have a history of being bullies. He advised the young men to not put their hands on him. These young men assaulted him anyway. One of the young men assaulted him anyway. He was also surrounded by other young men that were on the track team. Austin Metcalf, who was a young man at the school, accosted a young Karmelo Anthony, and he pulled out, it's like a Swiss Army knife thing. And I know that when we talk about weapons in other countries, it feels so abnormal. But I just want everyone to understand that in the United States, people are very proud to have weapons, and people raise their children from a very young age to be able to use weapons. And in the state of Texas, it was totally legal for Karmelo Anthony to have this like Swiss Army knife. It's something that you might take if you're going fishing or camping. It's a knife, but there's lots of other little parts that you can use for outdoorsy type things. And he had it in his pocket, and it was legal for him to have it. And it's also important to know that the Metcalf boys who had accosted this child, Karmelo Anthony, first, were also children who were raised in homes where they were taught how to shoot. We've seen pictures of them with guns. Those pictures came out after the case. This young man, Karmelo Anthony, asked asked Austin Metcalf to not accost him. He was accosted anyway, and he was surrounded by a young man who was much older than him, or much bigger in stature than him. The Metcalf boy was 200 pounds, over 6 feet tall, and Karmelo Anthony was under 170 pounds and under 6 feet tall. And he stabbed him with the knife as a way to defend himself. It's also important to understand that here in the United States, there are stand your ground laws, which means that you have the right to protect yourself if you are being accosted. You don't have to run away from somebody who is physically trying to cause you harm. You have every right to protect yourself. And that is what this young boy did. And he was found guilty of murder. He could have, given 35 years in prison. And we can juxtapose that to so many cases here in the United States. We have, of course, the case of Trayvon Martin, who was also a teenage boy walking home from a convenience store with, I think, a bag of Skittles and like some iced tea, some just items that he bought from the convenience store, when George Zimmerman, a self-appointed, guy who's out here looking for, people who he deemed to be unsafe, sees this young Trayvon Martin, calls the police. The police advise him to not follow this child anymore. George Zimmerman follows him anyway, approaches him in the night. Trayvon, trying to defend himself, begins to physically fight with this man who has sought him out, and he's getting the best of him. And in that moment, George Zimmerman pulls a gun out and shoots and kills this child. This is a teenage child, and he was found not guilty. And there are so many other cases. Kyle Rittenhouse, again, a teenager from the state of Illinois who crosses state lines into the next state over, Wisconsin. He crosses state lines with an illegal assault style weapon. This is a child who was a troubled teen. He had been having issues at school. There were videos of him assaulting a teenage girl just a few weeks earlier, pushing this young woman. He goes to this Black Lives Matter rally when he should not have been there. He was violating curfew laws. He also was illegally in possession of a weapon. He goes on to shoot and kill 2 people and injures other people. And he was found not guilty of murder. So we see that in this country, there are 2 different systems. There is one justice system for white people, and there's another justice system for Black people. Black people don't have the right to defend themselves when they're being accosted, when they're being attacked. But white people have the right to hunt down and murder Black people with the full knowledge that absolutely nothing is going to happen. And when people say that the justice system is broken, I don't believe that the justice system is broken. I believe that the justice system is working exactly as it's been intended to work. And that is to disenfranchise Black people and to allow white people who are committing the same kinds of crimes to get away with it scot-free. And that's problematic.
Yes, it is. And, the stand your ground law in Texas, it allows people to protect themselves, but it didn't allow Karmelo Anthony to protect himself because he's Black. And I always say this in America and in Europe, in white supremacy countries, the laws for Black people, the laws are not meant to protect you; they're meant to criminalize you. And for white people, the laws is the opposite. For white people, the laws are meant to protect you and not to criminalize you. So for Black people, the laws are meant to criminalize you and not to protect you. But for white people, the laws are meant to protect you and not to criminalize you. That's why it's called that's why I don't call it the criminal I call it the criminal injustice system, because black people are not protected by laws, they're criminalized by the laws. White people are protected by the laws and they're not criminalized by the same laws. That's why it's the criminal injustice system. And
And
it's really sad.
I'll also say, and I don't know if your viewers know this or not, but Karmelo Anthony lived in Texas. Texas is all, no, I'm sorry, that's Louisiana. But what I'll say is this, that in the United States, the largest maximum security prison is located in Louisiana. And if you could imagine the name of that prison, I don't know if you know this, but the prison is called Angola. The largest maximum security prison, maximum security prison in the United States is located in Louisiana, and it is called Angola, which is the name of a West African country, which is a country where many African people were trafficked from. Now, Angola used to be a plantation, and now we have Black men who, once you become a prisoner, once you become incarcerated here in the United States, it is now legal for you to become a slave. Slavery was ended for people unless you were guilty of committing a crime. If you're guilty of committing a crime, then you could be legally enslaved again. And so if you look up Angola, and I understand that it might be difficult for your viewers in Kenya to be able to access the same information that I'm able to access here in the United States, which is all online, which is also done purposefully. However, if you are able to look up Angola prison and look at some of the documentaries, you will see that there are white men on horseback who are overseeing Black men picking cotton today. This is happening today. On horseback, these white men are on horseback overseeing hordes of Black men who are picking cotton in Louisiana right now today at a prison that's called Angola. This is the reality. This is part of the reason why there is actually a benefit to a two-tier justice system. It's because the United States was built on the backs of forced labor, of enslaved people, and it's never been able to shake that need for it. And so it's going to always need to find a way to disenfranchise Black people because it needs its free labor. And so when we see a young child like Karmelo Anthony sentenced to 35 years in prison in a state like Texas that is run by people who are so anti-Black, we understand exactly what it is they want for him. They want him to spend the best years of his life behind bars in the service of working in a system that will extract labor from him for as close to free as possible. These men many of them are paid absolutely nothing per hour. Some are paid as little as 6 cents an hour. And then once you're in the criminal justice system in the United States, everything that you want to access, you have to pay for. If you want to call your family, you have to pay for that phone call. You're going to be paying a couple dollars per minute for that phone call. If your family wants to visit you, they're going to have to travel a distance to come and see you. If you want to be able to buy a toothbrush, toothpaste, they're going to have to put money on the book so that you can purchase those things from the prisons. The prisons are privately owned. So many of the men, and we know that there are cases where these prisons that are privately owned, they're experimenting on these Black men. There was just a testimony in Congress where a man was saying that he was aware of many Black men being dosed with LCD several times a day, 5 and 6 and 7 times a day over the course of many weeks, many months, that they were given these drugs. So they're doing experiments on these men in prison. They're denying these men of health care. People are dying of diseases that they should not be dying from because these are private prisons. Private prisons means that the focus is on extracting as much money from these enterprises as possible. So what happens is that the states need prisons. You have to have a place where you're going to, place people who have broken the laws. So the states are going to and the states don't want to be responsible for the overhead cost of maintaining a prison. So they'll hire a private prison company, and they'll give them a certain amount of money every year to run this prison. Now, these private companies will have clauses, and they'll say, listen, if you want me to take on this contract, I need you to guarantee that 99% of the beds in this prison will be filled at all times. Do you understand what I'm saying? 99% of the beds, 95% of the beds need to be filled at all times. So now what does that do? It incentivizes the state to ensure that they always have a healthy incarcerated population. And these private prisons will say, if these beds aren't 95% filled, you still have to pay for these beds that you've promised I'll get. And so there is an incentive to imprisoning Black men and to offering them as little in the way of health care, of any kind of rehabilitation as possible, because rehabilitation costs money. And private prisons aren't there to rehabilitate. They are there to make money, which is why it makes a lot of money when you have this young population of people who are now working for free. And so you have big corporations like Microsoft, for a long time, Burger King, fast food companies are actually having these Black men leave the prisons during the day, come and work at these fast food restaurants for 6 cents an hour, if anything, and then go back to prison at the end of the day. So of course, when you think about that, they want as many people in these prisons as possible. And actually, they would prefer these people to be nonviolent criminals, because nonviolent criminals make the best kind of low-wage workforce. You know that these people aren't out here trying to kill someone. They've gone to prison for petty things, or maybe they've done things that, I heard a story. I have a friend of mine who had a nephew who was put in prison for 2 years for stealing electricity. He had gone to a federal building or a state building, and he plugged his phone in to charge his phone up, and he was arrested for stealing electricity and given 2 years in prison. These are the kinds of laws that are on the books, and they are not on the books for all people in the community. They're on the books to criminalize Black behavior. This isn't new. This is exactly what happened after the Civil War was fought and Black people were freed. Immediately after that, we saw hundreds of laws being put on the books to criminalize Black behavior. So if you were a Black person after the Civil War was fought and you were supposedly free, say if you looked a white person in the eye, you could be in prison for that. You could be in prison for vagrancy. You could be in prison for not being employed by a white person. They were trying to do anything and everything to re-enslave Black people, because this country was built on the backs of forced enslaved labor. And it's never figured out how to actually have a country where people are able to live equally and be treated as fairly, because this country was not built on those kind of morals. It was built on the genocide of the Native American people, where tens of millions of Native Americans were brutally and inhumanely murdered so that Europeans could come here and take their land. And it was built on the blacks of enslaved, trafficked African people who were forced to this land to work for free and to enrich the white settler class in this country. And that is the foundation of this country. And this country is always going to fight to try to go back to that place. So when we say that we want to make America great again, when you hear that, you have to always ask, make it great again for who? Because it wasn't great for many people in this country. It certainly was not great for Black people who were forced to come here to this country. We did not come here because we were looking for a better world for ourselves. We were actually living very well in West Africa, in Central Africa, throughout the continent of Africa. We were forced to come here and build the wealth of this country for someone else to enjoy. And this country is always going to yearn for that time again. And so we see that in the kinds of politicians who are occupying the highest offices in the land. And we also see it in the policies that they're putting forth.
Wow. Last question before you go. 4th of July just happened recently. What do you think about Black people celebrating 4th of July? To me, I think it's a total joke because there's no way Black people can celebrate the 4th of July, yet you were a slave on 4th of July, 1776.
Frederick Douglass had a speech called, what does the 4th of July mean to a slave? And I'll quote a part of what he said. He said, "Your celebration is a sham, your liberty an unholy license, your prayers and hymns nothing but bombast, fraud, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes that would disgrace a nation of savages." This is what Frederick Douglass said about the 4th of July. Understand that while European settlers were enjoying their freedom from the British in 1776, they were enslaving, torturing, and holding in bondage millions of African people who had been brought to this land against their will. And we don't really paint a real picture of what that inhumane, barbaric institution was like for African American people. And that's been done on purpose. But understand that when, first of all, for those Africans who survived the Middle Passage, the boat ride from West Africa dropped off some of us in the Caribbean, in South America. And then for those of us who ended here in the United States, we were separated from our families, raped, tortured. You had limbs that were cut off. You had men that were castrated. You had people who had their hamstrings cut whenever they would try to run. You had people that were being beat within an inch of their lives, and they were beating the women as well. If we talked about the methods by which slavery was maintained, you would understand the depravity that they had to exercise in order to maintain it. Understand that in the South, there were more Black people outnumbered white people in the South. Of course, they had to, because whites needed a strong workforce. So there were more of us than there were of them. And when you think about it, what do you think they needed to do in order to objectify a population so much that they would remain enslaved? Because Black people were always uprising. They were always trying to get free. The kind of torture that Black people endured in this country is incredibly hard to understand. Also understand that Frederick Douglass's father was a white man. And so this is not uncommon. Rape was incentivized in this country because white people were enslaving their own children. So, if you happen to rape a Black woman, an African woman, that was just fine. Because now you could have the benefit of enslaving your own child and making money off of your own child, which they did. The way that slavery went in this country was that a person's status of being free or not free followed the status of the mother. So if the mother was free, then the child was free. But if the mother was enslaved, then the child was enslaved. And so this is the history of it. We could go into detail about some of the methods that were used to maintain slavery. It's very difficult for the mind to wrap around the mind the sick and disgusting things that they did. I'll give you an example, because there is a man who wrote a diary. He actually wrote out every single disgusting thing that he did during his time as an enslaver. And so he talked about how an African man had tried to run away. And when he was caught, and I won't talk about all the things that he did, he was beaten within an inch of his life. And then they used salt to rub the salt into the wounds of the man. He then had another Black man defecate into the mouth of this man who had tried to run away. He also talked about having the man lay out all night long, putting molasses on his body. Molasses is like a syrup, and then leaving him outside all night so that the ants and the animals that crawl on the ground could begin to eat at his body throughout the night. This is the kind of sickness, this is the kind of inhumane treatment that Black people who survived the transatlantic slave trade, who survived chattel enslavement, endured. Understand that. It's very hard to really give it any justice, because if the mind, a sane person can't understand how another human being could treat someone that way. But this is exactly what Europeans were doing. At the same time that they were celebrating their freedom from the British, they were enacting a genocide against the Native American community, a community of people that they slaughtered in the millions. We're talking about tens of millions that they slaughtered. And then at the same time, they were again holding African people in bondage. Now, remember that African Americans have fought in every single war in the United States, which means that African Americans helped white people to secure their freedom from the British. We were also fighting alongside them. In fact, the first person to lose their life in the Revolutionary War was Crispus Attucks, this fool of a Black man who's running around telling these folks that the British are coming, which is absolutely crazy. However, we have to understand the mindset of a people who had been kept in bondage. And there's something, there's this whole line of thought around Stockholm syndrome, where you begin to take on the same thoughts and values of the people who have been holding you in bondage. And so, understanding that, I don't want to down Crispus Attucks, but can you imagine that this person has been held in bondage by these white folks, and now he's going around trying to warn them of the British, coming. He was the first person to die in the Revolutionary War. But Black people have fought to secure the freedom of their enslavers in this country. We fought to secure our own freedom in this country. We fought in every single war in this country. And after everything that we have done, we still have, in the year of 2025, cases like the ones that we just talked about, Karmelo Anthony, and the other young man that we talked about, Cyrus Carmack Belton. This is the reality for us living in this country, and it's absolutely devastating.
It is. Well, like I always say, the best solution for this, Shanell, is if Africa puts sanction on America and Europe. No cocoa, no cobalt, no lithium. Let's see where your chocolates and your iPhones and your laptops and your Starbucks will come from. I think white people respect one thing and one thing only, and that's money. That's why, is it at the back of some dollar bill? It says, "In God we trust." That
Yes.
God is not the God that people pray to every Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. That God is money.
You're
money,
right.
money, money.
Yeah.
You touch their money, you get their attention. You get their attention. So, Shanell, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming. Please give your last word. Before you give your last word, I want to say thank you for coming. Please continue what you're doing. I watch you on a daily basis on Instagram, on YouTube, wherever you post. I learn new things every day that you post. And I mean, you don't know who you're inspiring until somebody who's miles and miles away in Kenya tells you that that they're listening to you and that they're a fan of you. So you just know that you have fans all over the world, and your work is appreciated everywhere you go. Please give your final word as we close this session. Thank you.
Thanks for all of those kind words, Arena, and the feeling is mutual. Your passion is palpable through the screen. We can certainly feel that your heart bleeds for Africa and its diaspora, and that you want to do anything that you can to wake people up, so that we can work together for the common good of the continent, which is our freedom and our prosperity. So thank you for what you do as well. When we talk about Karmelo Anthony or Cyrus Carmack, I don't want your listeners to think that these things are happening in a vacuum. The same issues that African Americans are dealing with here are the issues that our brothers and sisters in Kenya, in Uganda, in Rwanda, in Ghana, in Nigeria are also dealing with. It is a disrespect and a disregard for the lives of African people. And that is something that must end. And so we have to work together in order to put pressure on the governing bodies in our countries in order for this kind of behavior to be dealt with concisely and harshly. Black people, especially on the continent of Africa, should be able to live freely and with their head held high. They should not have to live in a country where they are being accosted by people who are foreigners. And that should be the case in the United States of America, but most certainly on the continent of Africa. And this is the reason why we have to understand that our struggles are connected. None of us live in a bubble. None of us live on an island. What affects my brothers and sisters in Kenya and Rwanda throughout the continent of Africa, those issues also affect me here in the United States. And so I want us to continue to work together to build bridges, to connect where we can, to understand what our common enemies are, and to work together for the benefit of the continent of Africa and for its diaspora. So thank you so much for your time and for the platform that you've allowed me to come and greet your followers. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Please give out your YouTube, your Instagram, all your platforms where people can follow your work.
Oh, of course. Thank you. Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Shanell Oliver. It's pretty simple. It's just my name. So just put that in, and it's the same on YouTube as well, and the same on Facebook and TikTok too. So I think it's Shanell_Oliver1 on TikTok. But if you put Shanell Oliver in, I think that it'll come up. So we should be good to go.
Thank you. God bless. Keep on doing what you're doing, guys. Thank you. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, support Sell Africa to Africans, support Shanell Oliver. Let's keep on keeping on. Because at the end of the day, if we don't unite, we will forever be having the same problems we are having now. So thank you for listening. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Serena. Bye.